this is a tragic story, a deeply tragic story, and we've been following it this week personally. And now that it's kind of broken containment, I suppose, here into the U.S. Now Elon Musk is commenting on it. It's making big news. Let's fill some people in on the details. So this is a case where there was a young man, Henry Nowak, or Nowak, if that's the Polish pronunciation, but Henry Nowak in Southampton. And he was an Englishman, 18 years old. And what happened is he was stabbed. He was stabbed by a Sikh named Vikram Singh Digwa. And this Sikh also accused Nowak of racially abusing and attacking him, said that he was calling him racist names or using racist rhetoric. And the Sikh stabbed Henry Nowak. The police showed up, handcuffed him because of these racist accusations. The stabbed guy. They handcuffed the stabbed guy who was telling police that he couldn't breathe. He's bleeding from stab wounds. And at least one person, presumably a police officer in the footage that was shown here to jurors, was saying, "No, I don't think you've been stabbed. You definitely haven't been stabbed."
Yeah, I don't think you have, mate, is what he said.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think you have been, mate. And he ended up dying there as he's handcuffed for allegedly being racist, for which there is no evidence, by the way. There's no evidence that he was. And he is killed and dies of his stab wounds. And they are now trying to investigate this case. Last I heard, there seemed to be no intention of charging these officers for any kind of wrongful death. That's why Elon Musk has now stepped in. He says he wants to fund a wrongful death lawsuit if anyone wants to file it against these officers. But this has come up because this is just a shocking example of these cases that happen that don't get any national media play. You're not going to see murals all over for justice for Henry Nowak the way you saw for someone like George Floyd, who had outstanding, criminal
Trayvon Martin and the law
cases. Yes, exactly. You're not going to see this made a big deal of because he's the wrong race and he was accused of being racist, for which there's no evidence against this Sikh man. And it's I think a kind of a microcosm of the situation in Western society right now under these ideologies that say you can only be racist one direction.
Yes. And so his only, quote, crime is potentially, using a racial slur against someone. Mm-hmm. And which for that, obviously, in the United States, it's not a crime and it shouldn't be a crime.
Yeah, but
over
just
there,
wrong language. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But over there in England, it is an offense to cause offense,
mm-hmm.
right? And so they had him arrested for this and that seems to be a big priority of law enforcement. That's why there's been so much outrage is, people who post something on Twitter that say anti-immigration and they get people they get police show up at their door over this.
Yes.
And now you have this sort of escalation, or perhaps, like you said, like a microcosm of what's going on is, a guy said something that might have been offensive, therefore he's going to be arrested even though he's the one who's dying of literal stab wounds in his lungs.
Yes.
I mean, there ought to be outrage about this. I'm glad that we at least have this one story that is beginning to travel and show just how unfair and unreasonable the British police is at this moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just follow up briefly here, one of the things I think that people perhaps forget or don't realize is, and I was talking about this I think yesterday, but in England, you don't have the ability to defend yourself in a meaningful way. So you can't carry pepper spray, you can't carry knives, you can't carry guns. Mm-hmm. And yet you may listen to this story and go, okay, but the guy got stabbed. And yes,
and it wasn't. And yes, okay. Oh, maybe he was illegally carrying a knife, right? No,
right?
No.
Exactly.
Fill us in on this, Sarah.
But you can carry a knife if you're a Sikh, because it's considered, there's a religious exception made in the law to allow you to carry a knife if you're a Sikh. And it's that knife that apparently Henry Nowak got stabbed by. And as a result of that, the police just left him alone to basically just die handcuffed. Yeah. So that's the sort of I don't know if it's a story that sort of encapsulates this suicidal policy of Western politicians. I think this really does kind of cap that, as we arrest the white kid for allegedly having said something offensive. We give the Sikh his, ability to bear arms. We deny the white Englishman the ability to defend himself with any arms, and we just sort of let the kid just die on the streets and say, "No, I don't think you've been stabbed, mate."
Yeah, if you actually care objectively about the issue of racism in the West, this story should enrage you. If you only care about racism in as much as it affects perhaps your race or your alleged guilt over past racism, throughout history or something like that, well, then you're going to say, "Oh, well, this is ridiculous." You're going to probably complain about this show in some way or whatever. But if you actually care about racial prejudice, this is a story that should have you furious. And thankfully, again, we've got someone like. It would be great if Elon Musk is able to actually do something to fund this so that we can see legal pushback, so that we can see an actual, through the correct methods, we can actually see action taken against these kinds of policies and the horrible, the tragic results of them. And there's been plenty of examples here in the U.S. Over the years that we could also point to. This one seems to be gathering some steam, gathering some momentum as, again, a microcosm, a symbolic sort of incident as far as these ridiculous policies. As you say, suicidal against the populations of these countries, the natives.
Seriously, can you imagine disarming your own people and then bringing in, people from all over the world who are more violent? And I don't mean that like Sikhs in general, like as in Sikhs are specifically violent, but like when you look at so much of the Middle East, because it's a war-torn hellhole. You do end up bringing people over who have this history of violence, and you bring them into a country that was actually very passive. Like even when England had the ability to carry guns legally and so on, like before the 90s, there were very few shootings. It's been a very passive people in that regard. And yet, then you disarm them, then you bring in massive immigration from a part of the world that is war-torn, and you have an entirely different thing. And it's just, there's something very twisted about it. It's like, imagine.
Well, it's as simple as introducing disruption, introducing conflict into a place where you have people trained not to be that used to conflict. Through just a cultural history of not having much going on. It's a high trust, unified society. You're introducing the disruption, and you've taken away their ability to deal with it in any personal way. And you're also taking away their legal defense. And this is something that we talked about with the whole issue of the right to bear arms and your ability to personally defend yourself, especially in an age when we've got these multicultural societies that, by definition, are going to have more conflict than unicultural societies. That's just a simple fact. It doesn't have to be because you hate people of other cultures or anything like that. It's just a simple fact of different people will have differences. Differences can result in conflict. These are basic facts. They don't have to rely on actual prejudice of any kind. And even people who we think of as being let's say, like, they might have some sort of at least socially liberal bent, will often admit this kind of thing. They just don't see the results when these policies are in place. And you have, again, when you're bringing in immigration, this happened even when you had different European groups coming into the U.S. You had conflict, cultural conflict. When different groups of Europeans were coming into America, you had conflict between the Native Americans, as they called themselves, the Anglo-Saxon descent Americans, and people who were Irish, people who were Italian, people who were Polish. You would have conflicts even then. So imagine the state now, and we're taking away people's ability to defend themselves in these more conflict-heavy environments. It's really, really ridiculous. So let's, again, pray for the repose of Henry Nowak, pray for justice to be done.